Welcome to the Mentors and Moguls podcast, your source for the inside scoop from some of the world's most accomplished business leaders, athletes, and creatives on how they've achieved success. I'm Heather Stone, a serial entrepreneur with a passion for helping others to overcome challenges and discover their untapped potential. Join me and our guest as we teach you how to break through those barriers on the way to crushing your goals. In each episode, I dive into a new topic with an inspiring mentor to find out exactly how they overcame obstacles, slayed self-doubt, and achieved their goals. Today's expert mentoring session is about to start, so grab your pen and let's dive in. Are you struggling with your podcast or wish you had a mentor to show you the ropes and share the secret to creating an award-winning podcast? Whether you're just starting out or you need a boost with your current podcast, this episode is for you. Today's guest is a producer and the host of The Satellite Sisters, the award-winning talk show turned podcast. Lian Dolan has interviewed everyone from Nora Ephron to Madeleine Albright and Big Bird. Her podcast is now the top-rated podcast for women. She has not only been on the Oprah show, but she has toured with Oprah throughout her High Gorgeous tour on behalf of O Magazine. She is a Los Angeles Times best-selling novelist with her latest book, The Sweeney Sisters, out on bookshelves today. Well, hello, Lian. I am so happy to be talking to you today.
Heather, this is really a pleasure. It's fun to reconnect.
It is great. I was talking to someone earlier, telling them that I heard you speak at an event, which I hosted a long time ago, but I'd never heard you fully speak in person. And ever since then, I haven't forgotten the message and the feeling that you gave me. So I'm so thrilled you're here for the masses to hear, I hope, today. A little bit about what makes you tick and the inner workings of Lian Dolan.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's intriguing. Let's go. Yeah.
Well, good. I listened to your podcast this morning. So much fun. I love listening to that over coffee in the morning. You guys always get into a lot of shenanigans. Is that rehearsed or that just comes authentically out as it goes?
One of the secrets is that it takes a lot of pre-production to produce a podcast that sounds totally natural. So, we've learned over the years, before we do the show, we all take our roles really seriously. We come to the table with ideas. We put it in a rundown and we sort of know where everyone's going. But more often than not during the pitch meeting, I'll have to say, oh, save it. Don't give us everything in the pitch. So that the shenanigans on the air, that's for real. Like a lot of times people say stuff that just, we had no idea the stories were going that way. So it's real, but it's produced real.
Well, it is a lot of fun to listen to. And I kind of hold my breath sometimes because I never know what one of you is going to say on the air. So it's fun. Definitely fun. All right. Well, let's get to it here. I've got some questions that are burning on my page. So Mentors and Moguls podcast, we're all about digging into the daily life and the backstories of our guests and trying to discover the secrets of resilience and your personal methods while overcoming obstacles along your path. Your story in particular is both moving and so encouraging. Without sharing the entire story, could you share a little short story maybe with us today that illustrates a specific challenge and maybe the mindset you tapped into while overcoming any challenge that comes to mind?
Sure. I mean, the one that comes to top of mind is really when it felt like the whole gig was up. We were on the radio for 10 years with Satellite Sisters. We were at public radio and then ABC radio. We were happy as clams and would have done a 6-day-a-week nationally syndicated show for the rest of our lives. We loved it. And then Disney decided to sell off the radio division. And this was at the end of 2008, the last time the global economy collapsed and the media business collapsed and shrunk. And we were surprised we couldn't find a new radio home. But there was this new thing happening called podcasting, and we had known a little bit about it. And I had some previous editing experience. So I just felt like our show wasn't done. And we still had something to say, even though we couldn't find another radio network to host us. So I took my iMac into the Apple store and I asked the 12-year-old genius if he could show me how to edit in GarageBand because I was going to produce a podcast. And he was like, sure, lady. Yeah, sure, you're going to produce a podcast.
He had no idea who he was talking to.
No idea. But I think I mean, I just felt like we weren't done talking, so there must be a solution for this.
Mm-hmm.
And the solution was in a new technology. And, Heather, I don't love editing and recording the podcast. It's my least favorite task. I'm not even that good at it, but I knew that I had to do it. Like if we wanted to carry on with Satellite Sisters, that's what I had to do. I think about that story a lot because I believe in sort of keeping up with technology and forcing yourself to do stuff even if you don't want to. It's pretty easy. I think particularly women let a lot of this stuff go by the wayside. And I really saved Satellite Sisters with that little trip to the Apple store. I think we easily could have just all gone our separate ways. But now we've been podcasting for 12 years.
Who knew? Did you know at that time that it would be such a success going forward with a new formula, a new format?
No. And really, I mean, there weren't even really numbers then. We just made up numbers to sponsors. Like, how many people are listening? We're like, millions of people. We didn't know. Because, things like the interaction, everything on the phone, the apps and everything, that didn't exist yet. It was actually kind of hard to listen to podcasts. It was hard to produce them and hard to listen to them. So the speed with which all of that improved has really surprised me. So I felt like our conversations were valid and there was still a creative need for what we were doing, but I didn't know that the technology would make it so much more accessible for everybody.
Did you have a moment in there when you were sitting down with GarageBand trying to figure this out by probably someone who was maybe half your age and they're trying to walk you through what to do and it's easy, lady, just do this, and you're done. Did you have any time when you were overcome with self-doubt saying, I'm really not sure if I can pull this off, or were you pretty confident the whole way through?
Oh, every time I had to edit the show, I was I was on customer support for a while. And uploading the show, I mean, that was a weekly event. So, and then after a couple of years, I got pretty confident. And then we started like trying to Skype in guests and do a few different things and connect, people in 3 or 4 houses. It started to get complicated again. But no, I mean, I would think every week there was like a cross your fingers, I hope we can get the show up. And ironically, we're back like recording in our own homes, in our closets again. So 12 years later, we're just going back to those skills that I learned because we were in a studio for a couple of years. I was happy to give up the editing duties. And then with all the stay-at-home orders, we're back in the closet and I'm back recording the show. So
wow.
Yeah. But, I feel like necessary evils are just something you have to live through in business. Mm-hmm. And editing for me is a necessary evil. So that's what I do.
I love that you're back in the closet. I don't know. I just have a mental image of you in like a 5x5 closet sitting on the floor. It's hilarious and I love it at the same time. It's authentic.
You're not far from the truth. It's not a big closet. And I do have a tray table that somebody gave me as a wedding gift, and that acts as my my desk. And I have an ottoman that I sit on. But no, I'm right next to my shoe rack. So here we go.
Hilarious. So you can check out your heels and if they need replacing as we're talking. No problem. Okay. So you are so much more than just a podcaster. You are an author, you are a presenter, you're a co-host. And oh, by the way, you went around with Oprah on her tour. So what is your number one passion? Is it talking or is it writing?
This is hard for me because that is sort of the two sides of my brain and the two sides of my personality. I'll probably say writing because I feel like that's where it all starts for me. I process the world like a writer does. I sort of observe, I make notes, I put them down. Before I go on air or on a stage or even to a dinner party, I think about what I might say and how I might take what I've observed in the world and put that, turn that around and make it a funny or entertaining story or find some meaning in something. I never walk into anywhere cold and just start talking. I don't really do that. I really think things through. And I think that's a writer's brain. But unlike a lot of writers, I also like to talk. So that I do like to sit in my home and write and work things out. But then I like to leave occasionally and talk to people. So, but I think it all starts with the writing.
I personally think that the writing is the hardest part. I think I could talk all day long if I needed to, but writing is a wall comes down sometimes and I just can't get over it. So I don't know. Good for you. Good for you.
But even writers have a wall. So, that's the part that you kind of struggle through. So maybe that is why I think of myself as a writer first, because I was like, okay, here's the wall. I'm going to write some crappy stuff for a couple of days, and then I'm going to come back and make it all fit together and make it better.
All right. Well, that's good to know. It's a little encouraging anyway.
Right. The crappy first draft. You can do it.
That's right. Well, let's see if I can take you back again to the birth of your podcast and ask who came up with the idea and how did you get all of you sisters on board? Was it easy? Was it quick? Or was it just a back and forth?
The getting on board was easy. The building the business was more complicated than we would have imagined. It was my sister Liz who decided that, there should be something on the radio that sounded like her friends or her sisters when they sat around, had coffee and talked, where you could talk about the news of the day, talk about a movie you saw last night, talk about a personal problem going on in your life, talk about your bad haircut, and then go back to the news of the day. And in an hour, you had laughed and you had thought about things and talked through things, and you left feeling uplifted. And Liz had worked in marketing and media her whole life. At the time, she was the global marketing director at Nike. And so she thought we could do that. The Dolan sisters could do that. And that was not obvious. I was a young mother and a writer here in Los Angeles. My sisters were teachers and nurses and in college admissions. We literally lived all over the world. But together, Liz, she's got a big force of personality. So we all said yes, because we never thought it would happen. And then Liz quit her job at Nike, and we're like, oh God, now we're in trouble. Now we're actually going to have to do that show. And we pitched it to public radio and to WNYC in New York. They were looking for more female voices at the time. And they said, sure, great. But maybe you've heard there's no money in public radio. So we had to go raise all our own money for the first 2 seasons. And that we hadn't really thought about. We thought, well, we just bring you this idea and then you'll give us the money. But no, that's when we had to, Heather, form a business. All of a sudden we were going to Silicon Valley, pitching people, looking for money. It was a lot more complicated initially than I would have thought. So it was Liz's fault. And, but it's been an extraordinary experience over 20 years.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm sure you could write an entire book on the struggles of the pitch in Silicon Valley. And when you walk out of a meeting, I should have said this, I didn't say that. And did it go well? Did we flop?
We rode the first wave of .com money. By the time we actually got on the air, most of our sponsors had gone bust. Like women.com. I mean, that was a great idea. I don't know what happened, but they burst in the bubble. So Silicon Valley knew even less about the radio business than we did. So that was helpful. And they did, give us money and we got on the air. So they seemed impressed by our pitches. Maybe we all should have taken a step back.
That's all right. It worked.
Yeah.
Well, your show is so great. I literally feel like I'm eavesdropping on a sister's conversation next door. I grab my coffee and I settle in to listen, and you always make me smile. No matter what, you make me laugh at kind of the normalcy of it all. And I appreciate laughing at the simple things we all experience in our life, but seeing it and hearing it through your lens of your sisters, and then it sounds like, so if it's rehearsed, it doesn't sound that way. The zingers that come in that kind of sounds like you all have to take a pause because someone just dropped an unexpected bomb right there in the conversation. I love that. It's so great. You guys have great chemistry. Have you been that way growing up always, or was this something new?
No, I would say it's the secret to how we can even do this, is that this is how we grew up. So there are 5 girls in my family and 3 boys. So 8 kids total in a big Irish Catholic family. And, that's kind of how you operate around the dinner table. You just got to jump in. You got to tell a funny story. No one's interested in your actual day or your actual math test. But, if you can make a funny story out of that math test, sure. It's certainly how we interacted growing up. A lot of interesting conversation around the dinner table or washing the dishes or in the car. And when we first got on the air, the pros, the experts said, you're really not going to be able to do this remotely. People who are co-hosts, they need to be in the same room. And we lived in 4 different cities on 2 different continents. When we started the show, that was the satellite part of it. And because we'd already been talking to each other for decades, we could do it remotely. We weren't even looking at each other. Like we didn't even there wasn't even IMing at that point or cameras or anything. But I knew if I was telling a story about something, I knew when Julie would want to jump in, from Thailand where she was living at the time and rebut something I had to say. Like that's just years of actually talking to each other. So, and then we retain that by literally not talking to each other during the week. Julie will go on a trip and say, "Oh no, I can't tell you. I'm saving it for the show." Like we've learned over the years, like don't tell the story just in a regular phone call. Don't waste it. Tell it on the show. But that is, that's years of talking to each other because it's hard to find a co-host with chemistry. I mean, you hear a lot of shows where it's not really zinging, but this is how we grew up and we're just still talking.
Well, it's definitely working for you and you're very lucky to have that dynamic. 8 kids. Oh, wait, that is an entirely new podcast episode, so we won't even go there. So what is the message that you most want your audience to take away from your podcast?
We always say that Satellite Sisters is the sound of friendship. And you've already mentioned that word 2 or 3 times in describing the show. We want people to feel like the things that they talk about with their friends really matter. When we first started the show, we started with a mission statement. Again, we were sitting in a hotel room together, and our sister Liz was trying to convince us to do this. But we felt like the things that particularly women talked about every day that filled their lives, that was always dismissed as like girl talk or chatter. And the radio at the time still is, with sports and politics. And that was it. So if it wasn't those 2 things, did it matter? But you know what? Going through a divorce matters. Getting a new job, going back to work after a baby, that really matters. How to talk to your son's teacher and tell them they're having some issues at home, that really matters. And so that's what you would talk to your friends about. And we want to be able to talk about that in that manner on the air. So it's friendship, it's connection. That's what we hope our listeners take away.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I take away. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do you ever get nervous about sharing honest conversations with your sister, knowing that the audience is listening to every bit of it? And what's that like? Do you have cringeworthy moments going, I wish that just didn't just go out there?
I'm scrolling through the cringeworthy moments in my mind right now, Heather. It's
share. Share.
Sometimes you just say idiotic things, or you call people the wrong name, or you bring up a story that your sister didn't want to talk about, from the past that they specifically said, I'll talk about anything but X. So, but one of the things, the rules we kind of go by is that we are on the show and we have chosen to be there, but our family hasn't. So I feel like we're okay talking about ourselves or responding to another sister when they say something about themselves. But there's no way we would ever take a shot at someone's husband or mother-in-law. That's a topic we stay away from.
Oh boy.
Kids that are not on the show, ex-spouses. There are a few of those. We don't talk about those on the air. So I would say for all of us, it's kind of fair game, but we leave each other's family out of it.
Typical, like a big family, harass each other and then hug each other at the end of the day.
That's what it is. One of our operating principles is that we all have to spend Thanksgiving with one another. So if anything you're going to say would prohibit that, then don't say it. Just don't say it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's a good rule to live by. I don't know how many families live by that, but that's pretty good. It's pretty good. So what is something that your listeners may not know about your daily podcast routine?
Probably that it's something we work on all week. We record one show a week now on Tuesdays every week. We are constantly thinking about stories and putting shows together. We have a production meeting the day before, and when people are pitching, it's clearly not something they just saw in the newspaper that day. These are well-crafted stories, and that's, I think, 20 years of working on the show. There's a lot of thought that goes into the flow of the show and what we talk about and how we talk about it. It's 100% not scripted, but there is tremendous thought about what each individual sister brings to the show and then how the show collectively presents.
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely an artwork to putting it together and acting casual.
Yeah, and One thing I would say too, and it's good for any creative business or anybody in your audience listening who does a lot of presentations and stuff. When we were on the air with ABC and with public radio, you get yelled at every day by a producer. After we got off the air, particularly at ABC, we were just put through our paces. They would pick apart our performance every single day for years.
Fun.
And it's super fun, Heather. Super duper fun. You've just been live on the air, and they're going back and and they'll play a clip, and it will be like, you hesitated for 5 seconds, and they were like, see that gap there? Yeah, that should have just been quicker. And I think it's tough to take in the beginning, but it made it much better at what we do. And almost every presentation, every talk, that's a craft. That's something you have to work on. The idea that you can do anything just by winging it, show up at a meeting or a pitch and wing it, that's a terrible idea. So I think what it made us realize is like, there's an art and a craft, and we take it really seriously, what we've learned.
Well, it shows. It definitely shows.
Thank you.
All right. So again, mentors and moguls. I'm so focused and obsessed with people having mentors. Did they have a mentor? And did you ever have a mentor throughout your career at any point?
My first job was working for a sporting goods company. I was a producer in the sports business, and I had a great boss in that job. He was definitely someone that recognized something in me and just let me run with it, even though I was very young. I was quickly promoted from a production assistant to a writer producer. I was flying all over the world. I was writing videos and interviewing athletes. And I realized at the time that he was a great boss, and this was an incredible experience. And, 30 years have gone by now since I've worked for Mike Doherty, but I think of him as like someone who really set me on my path and let me do it, and didn't look at me just because I was young or as a female in the sports business, which was unusual at the time, and say, oh, no, I don't want to give her that responsibility. And then I would say we had a great boss at ABC Radio, was the same thing, just a guy who thought these women have some talent, and he took a big risk on us, bringing us over. And we had a tape show on public radio, and all of a sudden we're doing 3 hours live, which is completely different. And he really believed in what we had to say and how we had to say it. John McConnell at ABC Radio. And then our first executive producer, Courtney Cole, I think just taught me a lot about the business and professionalism and expectations. And she so loved audio. She so loves storytelling that rubs off on you. When you have someone who so believes in what you do, that's rubbed off. And Courtney went on to produced Oprah's radio show and Gayle King's radio show. And she's doing a whole series of podcasts now, but she's remained a friend and a mentor. So I would say those 3 people were really, at different points in my career, were really important. And it really all boiled down to like believing in me and encouraging me. Like those were the 2 things that all 3 of those people did.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you pass that on to other people? Do you ever mentor people, or have you mentored people casually along the way throughout your career to kind of pay it back?
I feel like I have, yes. In fact, I'm working with a young woman now who's starting a podcast. Her mom's like, why don't you ask Lian? And I think she was surprised. I actually had some information to give her.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, we always had a lot of female producers that work for us on Satellite Sisters. And I'm always happy to work with young women who are writers. I think my nieces have come to me often for career advice, and a couple of them have gone into media. So I feel like I have opened myself up. I have not worked in a traditional office for a long time. So, when you're sitting at home, essentially producing by yourself or writing a novel, it's I don't have any formal mentorship program, but I really do try to be available for young women who seek my advice.
That's nice. Well, you can it's another show, Advice from My Closet.
Yeah.
I
mean, write it down. Okay,
hey,
I'm stealing that idea.
Go for it. Go for it. Do you remember a special piece of advice? I like to ask people, what was the best piece of advice you ever got from anyone? Anything stick with you?
Other
than don't go out with that boy?
Yeah. I would say probably from John McConnell, who I mentioned from ABC Radio. we were making the transition from our public radio show to ABC, and it was just going to be a different format and a different show. And he said, if you let people in, you can take them anywhere. Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that was like, as hosts, if you're guarded and formal, there's only a certain number of topics you can address. They're not going to care what your thoughts are on, the best meal to make for Christmas if you're a political reporter. They're not going to care about, great first dance songs if you only do sports. But if you show vulnerability on the air, if you let them into your life, you can talk about everything from politics to music to, what to serve at dinner, and people are going to care. And that really changed a lot of things for me. I felt like prior to that, I was sort of imitating a radio host. What should someone on the radio sound like? Or what should my speeches sound like? Or I would like to write things that are important. And once I sort of let go of that and just started to find my own voice and to let people into that experience, then I was like, oh, yeah, this is really true. You can talk about anything once you've let people in.
Mm-hmm. That is a great piece of advice. So thank you for sharing it with all of us.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's shift the conversation and talk a little bit about books, something you know a little bit about. You have a new book out. I am a quarter of the way through, The Sweeney Sisters. You grabbed me at the first 3 paragraphs. Thank you so much. Now I can't put it down.
Oh, good. All right.
So now this is your 3rd book, right?
It's my 3rd novel, yeah.
Okay. How is the process now easier for you since you're 3 in, or is it still the same tough process? Or maybe it's just a whiz for you. I don't know. Is it any easier now that you're 3rd?
It's never a whiz. It's never been a whiz. I keep waiting for the day when words are just going to, quote, pour out of me. You hear writers say that. I was like, what is that? I don't have time for that. This book, The Sweeney Sisters, was a book I sold on pitch to a new publisher, William Morrow. And that process usually, as a first-time novelist, you have to write the whole book. And, you can rarely sell on pitch unless you're really a big-time novelist. But this book I sold on pitch, and because it had a little bit of, it was topical, there's a DNA test involved and stuff. My deadline was really quick. And this was a really new experience for me to sit down and write something in about 7 months. I had to turn in the first draft, basically from idea to first draft.
Wow.
And that, Heather, I couldn't have done if I hadn't written those previous novels. I would have been a mess. I would have had no idea how to structure my work day, to structure my drafts, to think about my rewriting process. So from that standpoint, the more books you write, the easier that piece becomes. You understand, I got to get, this is how many words I have to write a day. I just got to get through this first draft. That's what it's called in writing, the crappy first draft. I just got to get through this crappy first draft so I can go through on the second and third drafts and make it great. And I have to get there by, January if I have to turn it in by April. All that kind of structural stuff, I could not have done for this book if I hadn't already been through that with other novels. But the flair and the confidence, that doesn't get any easier. You still have to write every word, is what I always say. You have to write all 90,000 words, and
no shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts to that. And some of that is just literally time in the seat. You just really have to write a certain number of words a day and get that done.
Do you have a time of day? Do you have a routine for writing? I know some writers get up really early in the morning before the household wakes up, and then that's when they have their best thoughts. Do you have a time of day, or does it just, you sit down whenever it strikes you?
Oh, no, I need to have a time of day. And I think, and that comes from just being a working mom. I don't have time to sit down when the muse strikes. I need to sit down when I have childcare in the house and get it done, or really early. So for me, I've always been a morning person. So when the kids were living here, I'm an empty nester now, but I would write from about 5 to 7, then get them off to school, then write again from about 9 to 1 or 2, and sort of wrap it up when I was working on fiction. For this book, because it was a quick deadline, I really compartmentalized my work life, because I find fiction and podcasts, they are so not the same thing. They're so different. They take totally different brains. It would be like doing an Excel spreadsheet and then, writing a marketing deck the next day, just totally different things. So I do podcast production Monday and Tuesday. And then for this book, wrote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And because a lot of writing for me too is momentum. Like it really builds on itself, and like it's just much easier if you keep rolling. The words come out a little bit easier than if it's more haphazard, at least for me.
Well, hopefully it sounds like you wear a lot of hats. So there should be a lot of hats in that closet way up top on that shelf.
That's true.
So you've enjoyed tremendous success over the years. Where do you find your inspiration for keeping things fresh, especially your podcast is one thing, but as you said, it's completely different to write fiction. Where do you come up with your ideas, your inspiration?
I consume a lot of media in general. I love that. I always have. I love newspapers. I like magazines. I'm trying to save the magazine business. I subscribe to like every magazine in America. I'm just one woman, but I'm trying to do it. I'll take in TV shows. I watch the news. Like I consume a lot of content, which I know is a word a lot of people don't like, but I'm okay with it. I consume a lot of content, and you never know where the next idea is going to strike. So, I like the idea for the Sweeney sisters. It's a book about an over-the-counter DNA test that reveals, oh, wow, new sibling in the family. That came from a Facebook post on our Satellite Sisters Facebook page. This picture of these three siblings in midlife, like, hey, we have a new brother. I'm not going to tell you all the details, but here he is. And I was like, that would be terrible.
Surprise.
Like, I don't want a new sibling showing up now. We're all like grown-ups with our own lives. It seems like a terrible idea. So, with my first novel, the inspiration came from like a newsletter from the Huntington Library and Gardens, where the book is set. There was just a story of a widow that had gone to work with a professor there, and they ended up having this romance and getting married and working together for 50 years. And I was like, well, that's a book right there. So you just never know. So that I continue to sort of refresh my well with other creative things, even if it's a trip to the museum. I see a lot of live theater here in Los Angeles, which I love, and I find that inspiring. I'll listen to Broadway show tunes when I walk the dog to see what's out there. So that helps me. I love that I'm in a creative field, and I use other creative fields to refresh myself.
Well, good for you. So an average sentence would go by me, but for you, it's a book idea. So I love hearing about that. Well, we have a super fan that knew I was going to be interviewing you today, and this is Nan Dawson. And I've been hearing about you from Nan Dawson for years. Literally, your number one fan. So she wants to know, what does the future look like for Lian? And can you promise that the Satellite Sisters will never go off the air?
I'll take the Satellite Sisters part first. Like, we love doing the show. So we're fine. We're fine doing it, Nan. We're going to keep doing it as long as everyone's happy doing the show. That being said, we do take a check-in. You don't want to be on the air if you don't want to be on the air. Like, no one wants to hear miserable people on the air. There's enough of those people. So like, once a year, we have like a real grown-up business meeting. Like, are we going to push forward and move on? Okay. And, a couple of my sisters do not participate as much as they used to, because they just decided, you know what, I have to go spend my energy and earn my living over here, because that makes, it makes more sense for me. So we have rolled with, ins and outs of various sisters, and we'll continue to do that. But we do feel like the message of the show is still relevant. So that's great, Nan. So we're going to try to stick with it. For me, I've found a lot of energy being an empty nester. I feel like I worked so hard the years that my kids were here. I mean, it's hard. I don't even remember my 40s, Heather. I felt like I was sprinting every single day with 2 kids and the job and the columns and the show. It was just a lot. And I just feel a real renewed energy now that I'm in my mid-50s and I'm an empty nester and my time is my own. Like, this is sort of what I was waiting for. Like, this is the dessert on top of decades of working around other people's schedules. So I continue, I have a couple of new book ideas that I've sent to my publisher, and I'll just continue doing my thing. That's my plan.
I could actually see you going out and taking archery classes, becoming a trapeze artist, and God knows what in your new free time with your new energy. There's a book in there
Ballroom
somewhere.
dancing.
There you go.
Yeah, no, that's what I did. I took up ballroom dancing.
Really? Was it
Yeah.
okay? Was it as
Yeah.
good as it was in your head?
Yeah, I didn't know I was taking it up. I just went to this dance class my friend asked me to go to, and then she was like, "We're learning the hip hop. We're learning a hip hop routine to Bruno Mars." I was like, "Well, that sounds fun. I like to dance." And the next thing I know, I'm like swept up in this middle-aged lady dance troupe where we do ballroom dancing and Broadway and hip hop, and it's tons of fun. It's super renewing. Yeah, I love it.
Okay, so the accidental ballroom dancer. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm writing that down as well.
Okay, good. I'll send you my address.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's time for my rapid round.
Okay.
Guilty pleasure.
Romance novels.
Favorite music.
Dance music. Yeah. Love Janet Jackson.
Okay. Rhythm Nation.
Yes, I just did a cha-cha to Rhythm Nation.
I want to live your life for a week. This sounds like a lot of fun. Okay. What is something that you've never done because it terrifies you that you would like to secretly try?
Scuba diving.
Oh, okay. All right. Looking back to your 27-year-old self, what would you tell your younger self? I wish I would not have wasted so much time on X.
On self-doubt, not trusting my own voice.
Okay. How about let's flip that on its head. So I wish I would not have spent, I wish I would have spent more time on X.
Fun. Yeah, fun. I wish I would. Fun.
Fun and ballroom dancing.
Just let a little more fun in all the work and all the stress, and just step back with the kids and everything, and let a little more fun in.
That's great advice. What does happiness look like for Lian?
Oh boy, I feel like I'm living it now. I'm lucky to have a couple of healthy kids. In this quarantine, I've discovered I really like my husband. I feel lucky.
Good.
Lucky about that. I love to garden, and I love to stay connected to my family and friends. So those are the really important things to me. And my dog. I really, really love my dog.
I love it. I love it. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a big German Shepherd.
Aw, okay.
Yeah, she's a good girl. Yep.
Nice. Where can we find your books? Where can people find more out about Lian and Dolan and the Satellite Sisters? Obviously, there's a podcast out there. Tell us, where can we find more about you?
Sure. So my personal website is liandolan.com, LianDolan.com. And that has links to my books and speaking page and the podcast right there. Satellite Sisters has a website, satellitesisters.com. And our podcast is anywhere you get podcasts on every platform. So from, Spotify to Apple to Overcast to NPR.
Terrific. Well, if you've been under a rock for the last 10 years and you don't know about the Satellite Sisters, go look them up because it's a lot of fun, a great way to start your day. Thank you for joining us today. I can't wait to tune into you next time and find out what you're doing and what you're up to and if you're still ballroom dancing.
Heather, this is so fun. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you again.
Likewise. That's all for this week. Thank you for listening to the Mentors and Moguls podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to rate and review the Mentors and Moguls podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find bonus video episodes at mentorsandmogulspodcast.com or check out our events page and our blog at heatherrstone.com. Until next time, make it a great day.